In the dusty streets of Mogi das Cruzes, São Paulo, Brazil, a young boy named Neymar da Silva Santos Jr. dribbled an old, half-inflated ball with more dreams in his heart than coins in his pocket. Born into poverty, his world was not made of comfort or privilege but rather of raw passion, relentless determination, and an unshakable belief that football could be the key to a better life. His father, Neymar Sr., once a struggling footballer himself, saw in his son the flicker of greatness and became his mentor, coach, and guide, shaping his path not with wealth but with wisdom and willpower. From the very beginning, Neymar's journey was anything but ordinary. The family lived in cramped spaces, often relying on candlelight when electricity bills couldn't be paid. Food was scarce, and sacrifices were plenty, but through it all, Neymar kept playing. His feet danced on gravel and concrete, mimicking legends he idolized on TV, dreaming one day to be among them, not just as a player, but as a symbol of hope for millions like him. Even at a young age, he possessed a magic that couldn't be taught. With each flick of the ball, he painted dreams, not just for himself but for a nation desperate for joy and inspiration. At the age of 11, his talent was too blinding to ignore. Scouts from Santos FC saw in him what the world would soon celebrate: speed, creativity, audacity, and an instinct for the spectacular. But even as doors began to open, the journey was still uphill. Neymar turned down several early offers from big clubs abroad, choosing instead to hone his skills in Brazil, close to his roots, under the watchful eyes of his father and the loving embrace of his family. He knew he had miles to go and battles to win, not just on the field, but against a world that rarely makes room for the poor to dream big. At Santos, Neymar became a phenomenon. He wasn't just scoring goals. He was rewriting the rhythm of football in Brazil. Each match was a symphony of feints, nutmegs, and finishes that made jaws drop and stadiums erupt. But more than his skills, it was his joy, his unfiltered childlike joy, that made him special. The boy who once played barefoot on the streets was now the face of Brazilian football. Fame came swiftly, and with it, pressure, criticism, and the heavy weight of expectation. But Neymar never forgot who he was or where he came from. Even at the peak of his rise, he remained grounded, often visiting his neighborhood, giving back to those still caught in the cycle of poverty he escaped. He wasn't just building a career, he was building a legacy. Then came the move that would shock the footballing world. In 2013, Neymar signed with FC Barcelona, joining forces with Lionel Messi and later Luis Suarez, forming one of the deadliest trios in football history. The boy from Brazil had made it to the grandest stages of Europe, but he didn't come to be a shadow, he came to shine. With Barca, Neymar dazzled the world, winning La Liga, Copa del Rey, and the UEFA Champions League. He was no longer the promise of greatness, he was greatness incarnate. But Neymar's journey wasn't defined by comfort. He always sought to challenge himself, to become more than just a supporting star. In 2017, the world stood still when he transferred to Paris Saint-Germain for a record-breaking €222 million, becoming the most expensive football player in history. Critics questioned the move, but Neymar knew that growth required risk, that leadership required stepping out of the shadow. In Paris, he became the face of a new era, not just for PSG, but for modern football itself. Yet behind the glamour, endorsement deals, and stadium lights, Neymar's soul remained connected to the boy who played for the love of the game. Injuries, media scrutiny, and pressure tested him time and again, but every time he fell, he rose higher. Not because he had something to prove to the world, but because he had something to prove to the boy who once slept hungry yet dreamed of stadiums roaring his name. Neymar became more than just an athlete. He became a brand, a symbol, a story that whispered to every underdog, "If I can make it, so can you." He embraced fashion, music, charity, becoming a multidimensional force who inspired not just with his goals but with his resilience, his faith, and his vibrant spirit. He never let the fame consume his humanity. He turned personal pain into power, using setbacks as fuel, turning criticism into courage. Neymar's story isn't just about football. It's about a journey from invisibility to immortality, from hunger to history, from a fragile dream to a legacy that will echo for generations. He is a mirror for every child who kicks a ball on uneven ground, a reminder that no dream is too wild, no start too humble. What makes Neymar's success so powerful isn't just his talent. It's his heart, his perseverance, and his refusal to accept limits set by circumstance. When people told him he was too flashy, he dazzled brighter. When they said he was overrated, he redefined what it meant to carry a nation's hopes. Through every injury, controversy, and doubt, he stayed true to the kid who just wanted to play. And that authenticity made him unstoppable. From that little boy in Mogi Cruises to the world's most expensive footballer, Neymar's path is proof that stars are not born in comfort, but carved through struggle. He reminds us that greatness is not about where you start, but about how fiercely you chase your purpose. He is not just a footballer, he is an emblem of belief, a living anthem of persistence. His story is not yet over. Every match, every step, every assist and goal continues to write new chapters in a book started with borrowed shoes and a tattered ball. And if there's one thing Neymar has taught the world, it's this. When you refuse to quit, when you play with passion louder than your critics, when you believe in the impossible long enough, the world has no choice but to believe in you too. But success, as Neymar discovered, is never a straight line. It curves, it sways, it sometimes breaks your spirit only to rebuild it stronger. After becoming the most expensive footballer in history, Neymar stepped into a world of dazzling expectations where every touch was scrutinized, every injury exaggerated, and every performance weighed against a price tag that had nothing to do with the soul of his game. In Paris, the lights were brighter, but so were the shadows. The media questioned his motives, some fans doubted his loyalty, and rivals saw a target rather than a teammate. But Neymar didn't buckle under the pressure. He transformed it into fire. He began to mature, not just as a player but as a man. He found peace in faith, power in humility, and inspiration in the voices of the kids who still looked up to him, hoping to follow his path. Every time he was sidelined by injury, he came back more resilient, using the pain as a silent mentor rather than a curse. He became fluent in the language of perseverance, refusing to let any setback write his story. Off the pitch, he built schools, launched charities, and reached out to children in the favelas, not as a superstar, but as someone who still remembered what it felt like to have nothing but a ball and a dream. He made mistakes, of course. He stumbled, he got lost in the glare, he let his emotions get the better of him, but he never lost his center. He never forgot the promise he made to that barefoot boy inside him, that no matter how high he soared, he would always stay grounded in gratitude. That promise is what turned Neymar from a footballer into a beacon for millions. And through it all, the magic of his play remained untouched. The sudden sprints, the impossible goals, the feints that defied physics. Each game was a canvas, and Neymar was the painter, showing that art doesn't come from technique alone, it comes from soul. And as the years went on, the world began to see Neymar not just as a player with flair, but as a warrior who carried the weight of dreams bigger than himself. He carried Brazil on his back in international tournaments, facing both adoration and heartbreak. When he wore the national colors, he didn't just represent a team, he represented a people hungry for pride, unity, and glory. The pressure was crushing, yet Neymar embraced it like destiny. And even when Brazil fell short, even when tears rolled down his cheeks on the world's biggest stage, he stood back up, not with bitterness, but with resolve. He showed that real strength isn't just winning. It's showing up again after you've lost, bleeding hope and still believing. Off the field, he became a symbol of modern leadership. Not the quiet, stoic type, but a vibrant, emotional, deeply human kind of leader who isn't afraid to show vulnerability, love, and joy. Neymar became a bridge between generations, admired by young players who saw him as a legend, and respected by veterans who saw in him the fire that keeps the game alive. He mentored rising stars, celebrated others' victories, and began to understand that legacy isn't built on trophies alone, but on the lives you touch along the way. And even as critics continued to question his choices, his club transfers, his behavior, his injuries, he never answered with words, he answered with action. Every comeback became a declaration that no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can rise again and dance, not because the world gives you permission, but because your spirit demands it. Neymar became living proof that brilliance is born not just in gifted feet, but in an indomitable heart. And it was that heart, that relentless fire, that made him more than a player. It made him eternal. Behind every match, every sponsorship, every headline, there existed a quieter story of Neymar, a story of a son, a father, a friend, and a fighter. His relationship with his family remained sacred. His father remained his advisor, his mother his moral anchor, his sister his lifelong companion. They weren't just passengers in his success. They were the co-authors of his legacy. Fame had come fast, and fortune even faster, but Neymar never let those things replace the simple truths of love, loyalty, and faith. He built a team around him not just to manage his career, but to preserve his soul. In a world quick to exploit, he protected his joy like treasure. And that joy became contagious, whether it was in his laugh, his dances after goals, or his celebrations with teammates. Neymar reminded the world that success doesn't have to be cold and calculated. It can be playful, emotional, and deeply human. He became a brand not by chasing fame, but by embracing authenticity. The world saw his flair, but those close to him saw his focus. He trained tirelessly, studied his rivals, and always looked for ways to evolve. He knew that being the best wasn't a destination. It was a decision you make every day, with every choice, every practice, every sacrifice. And even when newer stars emerged, Neymar didn't shrink, he adapted. He played deeper, assisted more, mentored others, and redefined his role. He wasn't afraid of change. He welcomed it like an old friend, knowing that evolution is the secret to staying timeless. And perhaps that's the most powerful thing about Neymar's story. He didn't just climb a mountain. He kept climbing, even when he was already at the top, not for applause, but for the love of the climb itself. Today, Neymar stands not just as a footballer, not just as the most expensive player in history, but as a global icon of what's possible when you mix talent with tenacity, joy with grit, and dreams with discipline. He is the boy who became a man before our eyes, the artist who turned the pitch into poetry, the warrior who turned wounds into wisdom. His name is more than a brand. It's a reminder that no matter how small your beginnings, no matter how loud the doubters, your story is yours to write. And Neymar has written his with a pen of fire. For the millions who still wake up in poverty, who juggle balls in alleys and fields, who face rejection, hunger, and doubt, Neymar's story is not just a source of entertainment, it's a lifeline. It says, "You are not where you come from. You are what you believe." And if you believe deeply enough, work fiercely enough, and never stop dancing to your own rhythm, the world will one day dance with you. Neymar's legacy will not be measured only in goals, trophies, or transfer fees. It will be measured in the millions of lives he has ignited, the countless kids who now believe they too can rise. And long after his boots are hung up, long after the stadiums stop chanting his name, Neymar's story will live on, in every young dreamer who chooses courage over comfort, who plays with joy in their heart, and who believes that even the poorest child can become the world's most expensive player, not because of money, but because of immeasurable worth. And in that eternal echo, Neymar will never stop playing.